Cabinet was informed that as of 25th September 2020, Zimbabwe's cumulative cases of COVID-19 stood at 7,787, with 6,057 recoveries and 227 deaths. It is noted that 6,415 of the COVID-19 cases are locally transmitted. Cabinet noted that whereas government's response to COVID-19 has so far prevented a catastrophic spread of the outbreak, citizens are encouraged to guard against complacence and continue to abide by the protocols and measures currently being applied. Cabinet wishes to reassure the public that the resumption of international flights and the imminent reopening of Victoria Falls International Airport on 1st of October 2020 is well on course, and that the assessments of other major airports has been completed. The Ministry of Health and Childcare has held a special consultative meeting with all key stakeholders in the tourism industry to provide technical guidance on the implementation of standards operating procedures for the reopening of the designated ports of entry. As a measure to guarantee the safety of travelers, Cabinet further resolved that in line with Statutory Instrument 2165 Section 8, which requires travelers showing COVID-19 symptoms, whether or not they have a COVID-19 free certificate, to be tested, and a nominal fee of US $60 be levied on travelers tested at ports of entry, and that the proceeds be used to replenish laboratory commodities. Also, metered tax operations have been allowed to resume services to allow for the movement of tourists and citizens who are unable to use public transport. With regards to law and order, Cabinet advises that in response to its earlier decision to further ease lockdown restrictions, security personnel will be directing greater attention towards the enforcement of critical COVID-19 containment measures such as physical distancing, the proper donning of face masks. And then following the decision to allow for the first reopening of schools, Cabinet noted that the dissemination of COVID-19 standards operating procedures has laid the foundation for the establishment of Sentinel surveillance centers. The centers will assist in monitoring adherence to COVID-19 protocols and promote a safe learning environment. Every school has been linked to a specific health team. This strategy will ensure active rapid response at local level. Designated temporary isolation holding bays have been set up at each school for individuals requiring further health attention after screening. There is also mandatory logging and thermal screening at every school entry and exit point. This is in order to enhance contact tracing and surveillance. Schools that are unable to provide water are being advised that they cannot reopen before the situation is rectified. Then Cabinet received a report on the revival of the National Housing Fund. Cabinet received proposals on the revival of the National Housing Fund, and this report was presented by Minister of National Housing and Social Amenities, Honorable Garwe. Cabinet noted that in terms of statistics available, the general demand for housing in Zimbabwe stands at 2 million housing units. The effective demand for housing from local authorities waiting list stands at 1.5 million units, inclusive of civil servants requirements. Cabinet also noted that in the late 1980s, government disposed of 75% of its existing pool properties to sitting tenants, and this was done as a way to empower those tenants. There was, however, no corresponding and equitable replacement of the properties so disposed of. Hence, the current housing deficiency, which affects ordinary civil servants as well as the security services sector, is high. At the same time, Cabinet noted that the devolution program, which has created structures at provincial level that require provision of additional accommodation for personnel also. Furthermore, The inevitable staff movements through transfers and staff promotions have compounded the accommodation challenges across provinces vis-à-vis limited investment in the sector. With a view to alleviating the accommodation challenges, Cabinet approved as follows. A, to recapitalize the National Housing Fund and the Housing Guarantee Fund portfolios. B, to institute forthwith a moratorium on the disposal of government pool properties. And then C, to find suitable land which should be availed across the country for the engagement of building brigades in the construction of government pool houses in line with a comprehensive national housing provision program whose chief aim is to empower citizens and civil servants, including those in rural areas. Henceforth, the vertical construction and densification model will be adopted in housing provisions in order to optimally utilize land and provide amenities efficiently and at manageable costs. In line with the Second Republic's thrust of private sector-driven development, the private sector, pension funds, banks will be facilitated to partner with other sources of funding in order to avail resources for housing construction. A user-friendly mortgage system will be designed for the purpose of easing the burden of home ownership for various categories of citizens. Then Cabinet also received a report on the preparations for the 2020 summer agricultural season. Cabinet received an update on preparations for the 2020 summer production season, and this was presented by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Water and Rural Resettlement, Honorable Dr. Masuka. Cabinet noted that the Meteorological Services Department has since issued a forecast for a generally good rainfall season throughout the country with normal to above normal rains expected. The meeting resolved to implement strategies to revamp production to ensure and assure food security, to increase import substitution, to diversify and increase exports, and to increase value addition and beneficiation. In fulfillment of these objectives, Cabinet noted that the distribution of inputs will be expedited for crops as well as for livestock production, while agri-techs will be capacitated to achieve greater mobility following the procurement of motorbikes that will soon be distributed to all the provinces. The agri-techs officers are already assisting farmers countrywide with soil sampling and analysis in order to ensure appropriate agronomic practices. The main programs under which farming activities will be resourced include the Pfumvudza Presidential Input Scheme, the Command or Smart Agriculture Program, and the Presidential Cotton and Sesame Program. Cabinet noted with satisfaction that the Belarus Mechanization Program will be launched tomorrow in order to give impetus to the country's farm mechanization program. On an equally positive note, the seed supply situation for maize varieties will be enough to cover both government programs, private sector, and individual farmers using their own funds and resources. Various schemes are underway to ensure provision of fertilizers. Cabinet also wishes to advise that the public that in line with the livestock growth plan, tick grease will be distributed to 1 million households under the presidential program. This is a stopgap measure while deep tanks are being rehabilitated in anticipation of improved water supplies for dipping. Farmers are being sensitized on the artificial insemination program, which is also set to be rolled out. I thank you sincerely for listening.